Hello and welcome to another episode of Mentor Musings. I'm JC, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Brett. Hey, Brett.
Hey, good morning, JC. How are you today?
Doing great, doing great. Let's
Awesome.
get to work.
Yes.
So, Brett, one of the things that we constantly get asked about with startups is the importance of branding. And people talk about this idea that they want to build the next Apple brand, that there's so much enterprise value and it's so important for acquisition. But one of the things that I think it's really important for founders to understand, and I'm curious to see where you stand on this, is to also prioritize their own branding. You know, especially earlier on in the venture, part of what people are buying, investing in, or just believing in is you, the founder or founders. And so I'm curious, how important do you think personal branding and kind of the overall brand of the entrepreneur is relative to the brand of the venture itself?
Yeah, I think it critical might be an over dramatization of it, but I do think it's super important because if you're looking to solve a problem, right? Usually you're starting a business to solve a problem that's out there. Hopefully you're passionate about it and you have something invested into solving this problem. Either it was something with you personally, something you found you can help other folks, but obviously you're going to have a passion around what you're starting. Hopefully, maybe not all the time, it happens, but I think the ability to start to communicate that, especially in the early days, right? When it's still founder-led selling, you're selling with that passion, you're selling with that excitement, that enthusiasm. But one of the things that I like to advise folks is start thinking about the next step, right? You got to sell and get the momentum going in the early days. But as you start to think about a scale perspective, you're not going to be able to do that. So how do you start to get the word out and, educate, knowledge, et cetera, about what you're building? So long-winded answer again, but I do think it's important to start thinking about it early and often. So curious if you have the same take or slightly different take.
I would tend to agree. I think one of the things that a lot of founders are reluctant to do is to want to put themselves in the spotlight sometimes, because obviously it's an effort, it's an energy, it's an investment of emotion. Some people aren't comfortable with it, and even if you are comfortable with it, it's an exhaustive effort. I mean, and there's also a balance you have to strike. I mean, how do you know how much time to put into some of these activities? But to your point, Brett, there are some very practical benefits from building your personal brand. First and foremost, selling. You know, and a lot of entrepreneurs, whether you're selling a SaaS product or selling socks or whatever it is, so much of what you're selling is a story, and the story starts with the main character, and you are the main character. You know, what is Marvel Avengers without Iron Man and Captain America, right? I mean, so people want to know your story and how you came to be. Because above all else, what people are adopting before any feature or value proposition of your product, it's your story and your ability to deliver that story. So definitely building your personal brand and starting to give you a comfortability and a platform to be able to deliver that story. And that's, again, your story is really critical. Brett, here's what I'm curious about. So we talk about the opportunity for sales. What are some things that founders can do to really build their personal brand reflective towards actually closing deals or generating leads? What are some specific tactics that you've seen work that in building their personal brand, they are likely building towards capturing more deals, generating more leads, and making more revenue?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, but I do want to tie off kind of on the last point where you talked about the brand and the personal, and do you separate or do you not separate? And it just so happened I came across this post the other day, right? As brands become more human, or they have to become more human, and right, the folks that I work with and interview that have grown right from startup to scale up have almost always been part of that narrative, right? So their passion, their personal brand is part of what they're building with the overall company. And if you think it's important or not, here's three folks. Elon Musk's Twitter following is double that of SpaceX and Tesla combined, right?
Wow.
So you're not just going to use your company's mouthpiece in order to amplify what you're doing. Richard Branson's Twitter following is 10 times that of Virgin Brands. And then Sarah Blakely has 20 times the following on LinkedIn compared to her Spanx brand. So those are three very high profile examples, but I think we're seeing that more and more where you have to be part of, I mean, you're humanizing your brand, right? And people buy from people, and which is tying back to, I think that's important. There's you just can't go out and talk and say, hey, this is what we're doing. I think part of it is the early content strategy that ties to your personal brand. And the thing that I advise founders all the time is, start with the problem that you're solving, right? So you're adding value. Like, hey, you're talking about, hey, you're the story. Well, I think there's two pieces of that story. I think there's you that's helping your character solve their problem, right? So you're starting to sell this narrative of, hey, this is how you can think about this differently. This is how you can solve that problem. And oh, by the way, myself and our brand can help you do that. So I think that earlier, I don't think it's optional anymore, right? I think if you want to grow a business, you can do a nice lifestyle business, but I still think the personal brand and the content are going to be critical to any size business at this point. To answer your question, I kind of danced around it, but
No,
I think I got
but
there.
I'm glad we took a slight journey there, because those statistics about those three founders, and I bet, Brett, if we go back and we look at pretty much every other company, so I know those are top tier, but I bet if we start going down to the secondary and tertiary tiers of businesses, we're going to see a similar trend, maybe different scale, but you're going to see that multiple effect where their personal, social media and kind of content engagement is even larger than maybe their company. And I think that underscores such a critical point. And we talk about, borrowing from strategies that have worked before. I mean, clearly there's something to this. And even if you're not the scale of an Elon Musk or Richard Branson, it's an opportunity for you to borrow from them and say, well, there's clearly a reason these really accomplished people are doing this. One of the things that you mentioned there at the end that I want to talk more about for a second is content. Content obviously has a ton of benefits in terms of your personal brand and in terms of being able to transact on the sales side. You said before, it's about telling that story. It's about what problem you're solving, the character you are in the story that's solving it, the character that your customer is, the why of what you're doing. There's all kinds of content platforms out there. I mean, I know you and I are very active on Twitter. We're active on LinkedIn. Obviously, we have a budding YouTube empire. Thanks everybody for tuning in. But we're very big about diversifying our content channels. So let me ask you this question, Brett. Do you have any ideas or tips on where you would guide an entrepreneur to start first with the platform, and then second, we can talk about the content they're putting in that platform?
Yeah,
is there any difference, or can they just choose one that they're comfortable with and move into that?
I think the broader answer is, start with where your target customers are. Where are they spending the most time, right? If it's, Instagram for certain consumer brands, or now TikTok is starting to grow and answer some questions. But where I play a lot in the B2B space, a lot of it's going to be LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn and website, because I think the earlier you start building that content on your website, the easier it's going to be for the organic search, right? Because again, as people are starting to think about how to solve problems, that's what they're searching for, is how do I solve this problem? They're not searching for features and benefits and those types of things. So there's kind of two advantages of building that on the web. One, as a founder, you're hustling, you're having conversations, with folks like you and I, you sell us your vision. Here's the product. Here's what I'm selling. But what are we going to do? What's the first thing we're going to do afterwards? Either maybe, and when we're talking to them, is go to the website and see, are they full of shit, right? Is this exactly what they're, and if your messaging isn't consistent with what that is, you've already lost credibility with, potential investors, potential customers. I'm not saying it has to be a world-class website, but again, this day and age where Google and everything else is driving the organic and problem solving, it has to start there, because if people can't find you online, you're gonna lose. So I think in a roundabout way, there's two ways. There's the personal side of it, right? So you're active on LinkedIn, you're talking about it, you're adding, and again, always about adding value. It's not bragging about yourself and doing these other things, but you want people to start to be able to find you, especially as you start to grow. Starting from zero is going to be really, really difficult. And hopefully, whether this company, this product, or whatever you're working on works or not, you're starting to build that, database of expertise, right? So your next venture, you've already become kind of a thought leader in these different spaces. So, there's no shortcuts with this, unfortunately. It's just getting and starting to put it out there.
Yeah, Brett, you brought up a really critical point. And I think one of the big selling points that I always emphasize with entrepreneurs, you and I can attest, we all know how much time, energy, effort. I mean, shit, just at the end of the day, you just Can the world stop for 1 second? Can one decision be made? Can one action be taken that doesn't require your input? And I understand how easy it is to overlook something like networking, but for entrepreneurs who get into this lifestyle and this career path and this professional pathway, and they enjoy it and they get value out of it, chances are you're not going to go back to working a 9 to 5 anytime soon.
Right.
So whether you win, lose, or draw with this venture, chances are at some point in the future, you're going to launch another venture. There are few things that you can do today in this venture as an entrepreneur that's going to absolutely pay dividends into the future. And building your personal brand and your personal network, which I want to talk about next, are the only things that are really going to pay those dividends. I mean, yes, the experience and going through the process, you're going to get some value out of that, but there's a direct line of sight into the value that you're going to generate from the content that you build, from the brand that you build for yourself, and then also from the network you build for yourself. Let's talk just for a little bit, Brett, about networking. And again, this is the easiest thing for entrepreneurs to overlook. They get into the process and they focus on their product, they focus on selling, and they think, well, if I'm not selling a product to a new customer, or if I'm not, potentially going out and trying to pitch an investor, let's say, I don't have time for networking. How do we make the argument? How do we drive the point home that founders must start to prioritize continuing to invest in building out their network? How do we emphasize that? And then do you have any practical tips for entrepreneurs who are looking to do that? How do you do it, Brett? Like, I bet people would be curious to hear how we network. I mean, how do you prioritize your networking pathway and continue to put time into it without it overwhelming your schedule or without just overlooking it?
Yeah. I mean, again, from personal experience, right? I started too late. Historically, it would be networking. Hey, when I'm thinking about getting a new job or looking for something, then you start the outreach. And see, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I just started networking, right? Taking meetings with folks that wanted to chat again, make sure it's aligns with what you're doing. But the advice I would give is you just never know where one of these meetings are going to go. I had a call the other day with a company out of Kansas City that, it's interesting. We'd met through a different group. Now all of a sudden we've got 2 potential business opportunities to work together. And that wasn't even the intent of the call. So I know time is precious, but the bigger and the broader your network, and go out with the intent of helping, right? Versus asking, because there's going to be a time when you really do need help. But if you spend more time giving as part of the network and growing, and it's going to be much easier for people to say, yeah, I'd really like to help you now. Yeah, you were there for me when I did that. So again, kind of broad. I didn't give you anything super actionable other than make the time to connect with folks. With the day of Zoom right now, hopefully at some point in the not too distant future, we can get back together. But carve out some portion of your day to make sure that you're networking and expanding, whether it's in like-minded groups through like 1871, where we're both involved. Connect with other people, because you just never know where those conversations are going to go. Curious as to your approach to this.
Yeah, so my approach is similar. I think networking in a broad term is important, but I think don't overlook the value of networking with fellow founders. The fraternity of founders is such an untapped source of knowledge and access and emotion and encouragement. A lot of founders think, well, if I'm going to network, I'm going to network with potential customers, potential investors. And again, those things are important. But one of the things that I advocate, absolutely being consistent, making that regular investment, right? Don't make it feast or famine. You don't gorge on networking for 2 weeks and then starve yourself for 2 weeks. You eat a balanced diet of networking day in and day out, or week in and week out. But one of the absolute best tips that I can offer is network with the fraternity of founders. If you're raising money, sometimes the best people to talk to are the founders who literally just raised, not the founders who raised 2 or 3 years ago, but the founders who just experienced that process themselves. If you're going through and launching your product and you're nervous about what that looks like and how to set customer expectations, talk to a fellow founder or founders who just experienced that and get their insight. And even if they're an entirely different market, even if they have an entirely different scope of focus or value, you'd be surprised at how much assurance you can gain and just little tips and more comfortability that you're going to build with the fact that things are going to be maybe potentially ugly or not go the way that you expect. But networking with the fellow founders is absolutely critical. So organizations like 1871, or if you happen to belong to, like, say, Techstars, which I'm a part of, or any of these other organizations, just make sure that you're prioritizing networking with fellow entrepreneurs, because just like you are going to be going through a cycle of ventures, they are going to be going through a cycle of ventures as
Right.
well. And so the same dividends that you're going to pay as you launch this venture and the next venture and the next venture, they're going to be doing the same thing and going down the same pathway.
Yeah.
And it also gives you an opportunity to network with people where there's not an imbalanced power dynamic. It can be nervous to ask sincere questions from potential investors or potential partners or people you don't know, or maybe people you want to sell someday. How do you express your concerns and your fears that we all have, the uncertainty we all have? It's difficult to do that when there's an imbalance in that power dynamic. So the other benefit of networking with fellow founders is that there's a much higher degree of openness or transparency or just appreciation for the uncertainty that you're facing day in and day out.
Yeah. And what I would add to that, it's just not random networking saying, hey, let's chat over coffee. Have a purpose and a reason for the meeting, even if it's 15 or 30 minutes. And I found that to be so much more beneficial versus, hey, can I get 30 minutes with you, to talk about what? And less value when you do it that way. But if there's specifics, so much more beneficial. And then secondarily, leverage your network that you have to get other introductions, because I connect founders all the time that don't know each other. And I can't think of a single time where I wanted to connect one founder to another that the other one said, I don't have time, or I don't want to meet him. Almost every single time it's been, no, I'd be happy to chat. And I provide a little context why I think it makes sense for them to meet. So it doesn't have to be cold outreach networking. Leverage the folks to connect with additional folks. But again, I don't want to say have a plan, that's a little too much, but at least have an idea of what you want to accomplish during that conversation.
Absolutely. Connect with founders, have a framework for networking, prioritize consistent networking, and make sure that you know that this is going to pay dividends over multiple cycles of your venture and multiple ventures in the future.
Exactly.
Brett,
Can I give
any
you
final thoughts?
Can I give you one pet peeve?
Please.
Don't start the email by saying, hey, can I pick your brain?
Right. Okay.
I don't know why that bothers me, but it's just one of those, hey, I'm happy to share and those types of things. But I don't know, maybe you have a different take on that, but that's just one of I don't have too many pet peeves, but that's one of them.
No, I don't know that I get that one that much when people look to network, but I would say this, that it's important that if you're networking with someone, have an agenda for that networking meeting. It doesn't have to be strict, but at least have a couple bullet points and express that, whether it's in the email or at the onset of the conversation, to say, hey, here are the 3 things that I want to talk about. Don't make it a 20-point agenda, but make it something that you can kind of use to guide the conversation so that you both have an understanding of where you're going to go. And then one other, not pet peeve, but just best practice is always have a plan for a follow-up. Always end the call or follow up on the call with, hey, let's touch base again in a couple of weeks, or hey, let me know when this happens, or hey, I'll let you know when this happens, whether it's time-based or milestone-based or whatever. You want to continue to kind of network that, or connect with that network connection as much as you can.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. And I love that. And one of my mantras is have a plan, right? Just have a plan. It doesn't have to be super detailed, as you said, or sophisticated, but have a plan. I think that's a good way to leave this week. I don't know how we're doing on time.
Yeah, ironically enough, this was the episode where Brett and I, well, this will probably be quick, and we've probably gone the longest. So, okay, everybody, well, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you as always for tuning in. We really appreciate your views. Share, promote, like, comment. And by the way, if you're networking and you're watching this and you're not connected with Brett and I on Twitter and LinkedIn, reach out and connect with us, right? We're happy to network with more people. We'll introduce you to our networks, whatever we can do. But thanks, everybody, for tuning in. And until next time, best of luck with your future.
Yep. Cheers. See you, JC.
See you, Brett.